Elena Rossi stood in Lucian Moretti's office, her hands trembling as she stared at the contract that would trade her freedom for her father's life. The notorious Mafia Boss sat across from her, his cold, dark eyes promising nothing but ownership. She had one choice: sign her name and become his wife, or watch her father rot in a cell for crimes he didn't commit. The pen felt like a weapon in her hand. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them, unaware that a woman's entire existence was about to be sold to the devil himself. If you're ready to witness a story of power, betrayal, and an impossible love born from vengeance, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt like descending into hell, even though Elena was going up. She watched the numbers climb on the polished brass panel, each floor bringing her closer to a man she'd never met, but whose reputation had preceded him like a shadow. Lucian Moretti. The name alone made hardened criminals go quiet. Her father had whispered it once, months ago, his face pale as milk, and Elena had known then that their family had stumbled into something far beyond their means to escape. Now here she was, dressed in a simple black dress that her mother would have called funeral attire, her only jewelry a thin gold cross she'd tucked beneath her collar. The lawyer standing beside her, a narrow man named Vincent with wire-rimmed glasses and a mouth that barely moved when he spoke, had been silent since they'd entered the building. He'd simply handed her a folder when he'd picked her up from her apartment and said, "Read it. Understand it. There won't be time for questions." The contract inside had been 23 pages of legal language that all boiled down to one simple, horrifying truth. Marry Lucian Moretti, or her father would be convicted of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy, charges that had been fabricated, charges that came with a sentence that would kill him. Her father was 62 and had a bad heart. Prison would be a death sentence. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Vincent gestured for her to step out first, and Elena forced her legs to move. The hallway was wide and empty, lined with dark wood panels and ambient lighting that seemed designed to make you feel small. At the far end stood a set of double doors, black lacquered wood with silver handles. Two men in suits flanked them, hands clasped in front of their bodies, expressions blank. Security. Of course. "Miss Rossi," Vincent said quietly. "A word of advice." She looked at him. "Don't show fear. He can smell it." Elena's stomach twisted, but she nodded. Vincent walked ahead and spoke briefly to one of the guards, who opened the door without a word. Then Vincent turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "After you." She stepped through. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the far wall, offering a panoramic view of the city at dusk, lights beginning to flicker on like stars. The space was furnished with dark leather, sleek metal, and art that looked expensive enough to ransom a small country. Everything was pristine, controlled, a reflection of the man who owned it. And there he was. Lucian Moretti sat behind a massive desk near the windows, his silhouette framed against the dying light. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't acknowledge her immediately. He was reading something on a tablet, his posture relaxed, one hand resting on the armrest of his chair. He wore a black suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. Dark hair, sharp features, the kind of face that belonged in old Italian paintings, beautiful and dangerous. Elena stopped a few feet from the desk, her pulse hammering in her throat. Vincent moved past her and placed the folder on the desk. "Miss Rossi," as requested. Lucian's eyes lifted then, and Elena felt the full weight of his attention settle on her. His gaze was dark, unflinching, clinical, like he was assessing livestock. "Leave us," Lucian said. His voice was deep, quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Vincent hesitated for half a second, then nodded and left. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the room felt much smaller. Lucian set the tablet aside and leaned back in his chair, studying her. The silence stretched. Elena refused to look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "Sit," he said finally, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat. Her hands gripped the armrest to keep them from shaking. Lucian opened the folder Vincent had brought, skimmed the first page, then looked up at her again. "Elena Rossi, 26, works as a translator for a publishing house. Father, Marco Rossi, currently under investigation for financial crimes. Mother, deceased. He paused. Do I have that right? You know you do, Elena said. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. Or irritation. Vincent tells me you've read the contract. I have. And? And it's insane. Lucian tilted his head slightly. Is it? You're asking me to marry you to save my father from charges you know are fake. You fabricated evidence, buried him in legal fees he can't afford, and now you're offering me a deal that makes me your property. She leaned forward, her fear turning to anger despite herself. Yes, it's insane. For a long moment, Lucian said nothing. Then he stood, moving around the desk with an easy, predatory grace. He stopped a few feet from her chair, hands in his pockets, looking down at her. Your father made mistakes, he said. He got involved with people he shouldn't have. Took money that wasn't his. Made promises he couldn't keep. That's not true. It doesn't matter if it's true. Lucian's voice didn't rise, but the coldness in it cut deeper than shouting ever could. What matters is what I can prove, and I can prove enough to bury him. Elena stood, refusing to let him tower over her. Why? What did he do to you? Lucian's jaw tightened, the first crack in his calm exterior. He turned away from her, walking toward the windows. Outside, the city sprawled in every direction, a kingdom of lights and shadows. Your father didn't do anything to me, he said quietly, but your mother did. Elena's breath caught. What? Lucian didn't turn around. 15 years ago, my younger brother was killed in a car accident. The driver was under the influence, ran a red light. My brother was 20 years old. He was going to be a doctor. His hands clenched behind his back. The driver's name was Sofia Castellano. She walked away with a broken arm and a suspended license. No jail time, no real consequences. The name hit Elena like a fist to the chest. Sofia Castellano, her mother's maiden name. That's not... She couldn't finish the sentence. Her mind was reeling. Lucian turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was pure ice. Your mother killed my brother, and your father helped her cover it up, paid off witnesses, made sure the case went away quietly. So yes, Elena, your family owes me a debt. My mother didn't... Elena's voice broke. She wouldn't have... She did. Lucian crossed the space between them in 2 strides, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. And now you're going to pay it. Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. This isn't justice. This is revenge. Call it whatever you want. Lucian stepped back, his expression unreadable again. The contract is simple. You marry me. You live in my home, attend events at my side, play the role of my wife in public. In exchange, the charges against your father disappear. He gets to live out his remaining years in peace. And if I refuse, then your father goes to prison. He'll die there within a year, maybe less. Lucian walked back to his desk and picked up a pen, holding it out to her. Your choice. Elena stared at the pen. Her whole body felt numb. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. She thought of her father, small and fragile in his hospital bed after his last heart scare, holding her hand and telling her he was proud of her. She thought of the way he'd smiled when she'd gotten her job, the way he'd kept her mother's photo on his nightstand even after all these years. She crossed to the desk, took the pen from Lucian's hand. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the coldness of his skin. The contract was already open to the signature page. Elena scanned the terms one last time. Marriage, obedience, public appearances. Term of 5 years, unless terminated earlier by mutual consent or death. Death. She pressed the pen to paper and signed her name. Lucian took the contract, witnessed her signature with his own, then closed the folder. The wedding will be in 4 days. Vincent will handle the arrangements. You'll move into my estate tomorrow. 4 days? Elena's voice was hoarse. I don't see the point in waiting. Lucian returned to his chair, already dismissing her. Vincent will take you home. Pack what you need. Anything else will be provided. Elena stood there, frozen, the enormity of what she'd just done crashing over her like a wave. She'd signed her life away, bound herself to a man who hated her family, a man who saw her as nothing more than a living punishment. One more thing, Lucian said, not looking up from his tablet. Don't run. Don't try to contact your father about this. And don't think for a second that you can get out of this contract once it's signed. If you try, the deal is void. Your father goes to prison, and you—" He finally looked at her, his expression flat. "You'll wish you'd never been born." Elena forced herself to speak. "I understand." "Good." Lucian waved a hand toward the door. "You're dismissed." She turned and walked out, each step feeling like she was wading through water. The guards outside didn't look at her. Vincent was waiting by the elevator, his expression neutral. The ride down was silent. It wasn't until she was in the back of Vincent's car, the city passing by in a blur of lights, that Elena allowed herself to cry. She pressed her face into her hands and sobbed, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Vincent said nothing. He just drove. When they reached her apartment, he handed her a business card. "Someone will be here at 9 tomorrow morning to collect you. Be ready." Elena took the card without looking at it and got out of the car. She climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up in a daze, unlocked the door, and stepped into the small space that had been her sanctuary for the past 3 years. It didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a cage she was about to leave for a bigger, more gilded one. She sank onto her couch and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed in her purse, probably her father's nurse checking in. She couldn't answer it, couldn't hear his voice right now, couldn't pretend everything was going to be okay. Because it wasn't. She'd just sold herself to the devil, and there was no way out. The next morning arrived too quickly. Elena had barely slept. She'd spent most of the night packing a single suitcase, trying to decide what you brought when you were moving into a stranger's home as his unwilling wife. Practical clothes, a few books, the photo of her parents on their wedding day, her mother's smile bright and untroubled. She wondered if her mother had known, if she'd carried the guilt of what happened all those years, if that was why she'd been so quiet in her final months, staring out windows like she was waiting for something, or someone. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Elena opened it to find a woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Miss Rozzi, I'm Claudia. I'll be escorting you to the estate. No pleasantries, no small talk, just business." Elena grabbed her suitcase and followed Claudia down to a black SUV idling at the curb. The driver took her bag, and Claudia gestured for Elena to get in the back. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. They drove north, out of the city and into the hills where the estates grew larger and the gates grew taller. After 40 minutes, they turned onto a private road lined with cypress trees. At the end sat a sprawling villa, all stone and iron and glass, perched on a hillside like a fortress. Elena's stomach sank. The SUV pulled through the gates and stopped at the front entrance. Claudia got out first and motioned for Elena to follow. The door to the villa opened before they reached it, and a middle-aged man in a butler's uniform greeted them with a stiff nod. "Miss Rossi, welcome. I'm Bernard. I manage the household. If you need anything, you may ask me or any of the staff." Staff. Of course there was staff. Bernard led her inside through a grand entryway with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Elena's entire apartment building. The villa was immaculate, cold, beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful. It didn't feel like a home. "Your rooms are on the second floor, east wing," Bernard said. "Mr. Moretti's quarters are in the west wing. You will have privacy." Translation: "Don't bother him." Elena nodded. Bernard showed her to a suite that was 3 times the size of her apartment. A king bed with silk linens, a sitting area, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. Everything pristine, untouched, impersonal. "Dinner is served at 7, Bernard said. "Mr. Moretti expects you to join him." "And if I don't?" Bernard's expression didn't change. "Mr. Moretti expects you to join him." He left, closing the door behind him. Elena stood in the middle of the room, feeling like she'd been dropped onto another planet. She walked to the window and looked out over the estate grounds. Manicured gardens, a pool, a guest house in the distance. Beyond that, the hills rolled away into haze. She was a prisoner in paradise. At 7 o'clock sharp, Elena made her way downstairs. Bernard was waiting in the foyer and led her to a formal dining room where a long table had been set for 2. Lucian was already seated at the head, reading something on his phone. He didn't look up when she entered. Elena took the seat to his right. A moment later, staff appeared with the first course, Some kind of soup that smelled like herbs and cream. They ate in silence. Elena forced herself to take small bites, her appetite non-existent. Across from her, Lucian ate with calm efficiency, his attention still on his phone. She might as well have been invisible. Halfway through the second course, he finally spoke. The wedding will be at my family's estate. Small ceremony, immediate family, and a few business associates. Elena set down her fork. I don't have any family to invite. I know. Of course he did. He knew everything. You'll meet with a stylist tomorrow, Lucian continued. She'll handle your dress, hair, everything. You don't need to make any decisions. Just show up. How romantic, Elena said flatly. Lucian's eyes lifted from his phone, sharp and cold. This isn't a romance, Elena. Don't mistake it for one. Believe me, I won't. He studied her for a long moment, then returned his attention to his phone. Good. The rest of the meal passed in silence. When it was over, Lucian stood without a word and left the room. Elena sat there alone, staring at her half-eaten plate, feeling the weight of the next 5 years settling over her like a stone. The days leading up to the wedding blurred together. The stylist came. Elena was measured, fitted, draped in white fabric she didn't care about. The dress was beautiful, lace and silk, elegant and expensive, but it felt like a costume. She was playing a part in someone else's story. The ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in the garden of the Moretti family estate, a sprawling property even larger than Lucian's villa. There were maybe 30 people in attendance. Elena recognized none of them. They watched her with curious, calculating eyes as she walked down an aisle of white roses, her hand clutching a bouquet she couldn't name. Lucian stood at the altar in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. When she reached him, he took her hand, his grip firm, impersonal, and they faced the officiant together. The vows were traditional. Elena spoke them like she was reciting lines from a script. Lucian's voice was steady, emotionless. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Lucian leaned in and pressed a brief, cold kiss to her lips. It lasted less than a second. The guests applauded politely. There was a reception afterward. Champagne. Polite conversation. People congratulating Lucian, eyeing Elena with barely concealed speculation. She smiled when she was supposed to smile, nodded when she was supposed to nod, and counted the minutes until it was over. When they finally returned to the villa, Lucian disappeared into his wing without a word. Elena went to hers, peeled off the wedding dress, and sat on the edge of the bed in her slip, staring at the ring on her finger. It was platinum. Simple. Expensive. A shackle in disguise. She didn't cry. She was too numb for tears. The first 2 weeks of marriage were a study in isolation. Lucian was rarely home. When he was, he kept to his wing of the villa or locked himself in his office. They had dinner together most nights, silent affairs where Elena picked at her food and Lucian worked on his phone or laptop. He never asked her questions, never tried to make conversation. She was a piece of furniture, decorative, functional, ignored. Elena spent her days wandering the villa, reading in the library, swimming in the pool. The staff was polite but distant, clearly instructed not to engage with her beyond basic courtesies. Bernard ran the household like clockwork. Claudia appeared occasionally to deliver messages or instructions, always from Lucian, never directly. Elena's only connection to the outside world was her phone, but even that felt monitored. She'd tried calling her father once, and Vincent had called her back within minutes to remind her of the terms. No contact, no explanations. Her father thought she was traveling for work. That was the story Vincent had fed him. Elena hated the lie, but she hated the alternative more. At night, she lay in her too large bed and listened to the silence of the villa. Sometimes she heard footsteps in the hallway. Lucian, pacing, unable to sleep. She wondered what kept him awake. Guilt? Anger? Or just the weight of whatever empire he was running? She didn't care enough to ask. 3 weeks into the marriage, Elena was in the library when she overheard something she wasn't supposed to. She'd been curled up in one of the leather chairs near the window, reading, when voices drifted in from the hallway. Male voices. Tense. You're playing a dangerous game, Lucian. That was a voice she didn't recognize. Older. Gravelly. I know what I'm doing. Lucian's voice. Calm. Controlled. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. This has nothing to do with emotion, doesn't it? You married the girl to settle a 15-year-old score. That's not strategy, that's revenge. A pause. Then Lucian, quieter. She deserves to know what her family cost me. And what does punishing her accomplish? Your brother is still dead, her mother is still dead. All you're doing is chaining yourself to a ghost. Elena's heart pounded. She set the book down silently, barely breathing. I didn't ask for your opinion, Sal. No, you asked for my loyalty, and I'm giving it. But loyalty doesn't mean I won't tell you when you're making a mistake. Footsteps. That girl didn't kill your brother. Holding her hostage won't bring him back. I'm aware. Are you? Silence, long and heavy. Then Sal again. Just don't forget what you're building here. Don't let the past destroy the future. Footsteps faded down the hall. Elena sat frozen, her mind racing. Lucian's brother. The accident. Her mother. It wasn't just revenge, it was grief, twisted and calcified into something cold and brutal, and she was caught in the middle of it. That night at dinner, Elena broke the silence. I heard you talking to Sal today. Lucian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. His eyes lifted to hers, sharp and dangerous. You were eavesdropping. I was in the library. You were in the hallway. It's not my fault your voice carries. He set the fork down. What did you hear? Enough. Elena leaned back in her chair, meeting his gaze. Enough to know that you're not doing this because of some business debt or strategic alliance. You're doing it because you blame my mother for your brother's death. Lucian's jaw tightened. Your mother killed him. It was an accident. An accident she walked away from. She lived with the guilt for the rest of her life. Elena's voice rose despite herself. You think she didn't pay for it? You think it didn't destroy her? Not enough. Lucian stood, his chair scraping against the floor. She got to live. She got to have a family. My brother got a grave. Elena stood too, her hands braced on the table. So you thought you'd take it out on me? Punish me for something I had nothing to do with? You're her daughter. You carry her blood. That's enough. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Elena stared at him, her chest tight with anger and something else, pity. Because for all his power, all his control, Lucian Moretti was just a man who'd never learned how to let go. You're pathetic, she said quietly. His eyes darkened. Careful. You heard me. You're pathetic. You've built this entire empire, commanded all this loyalty, and you're still a scared, angry kid who lost his brother and never moved on. She stepped around the table, closing the distance between them. You want revenge? Fine. You have it. I'm here. I signed the contract. I'm your prisoner. But don't pretend this is justice. It's just you being too much of a coward to face your own grief. Lucian moved so fast she didn't have time to react. One moment he was standing still, the next, his hand was wrapped around her wrist, his grip like iron. He pulled her close, his face inches from hers. You don't know anything about me, he said, his voice low and deadly. Elena didn't flinch. I know enough. For a long moment, they stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Lucian released her, stepping back like she'd burned him. Get out, he said. Elena turned and walked out of the dining room, her heart pounding, her wrist aching where he'd grabbed her. She didn't look back. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her wrists still tender where Lucian had grabbed her, replaying the confrontation over and over in her mind. She'd crossed a line, she knew it, but she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The truth had needed to be said, even if it made everything worse. Morning came with gray light filtering through the curtains. Elena dragged herself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water beat against her shoulders until her skin turned pink. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, she found a garment bag hanging on the back of her door. Inside was a dress, navy blue, elegant, conservative. A note was pinned to the hanger in Claudia's precise handwriting. Wear this tonight. Car leaves at 7. No explanation, no context. Elena crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. At 6:30, Claudia appeared at her door, already dressed in a sleek black pantsuit. You're not ready. I don't know where I'm going. A fundraiser, art museum downtown. Mr. Moretti's presence is expected. So is yours. Claudia's gaze swept over Elena's jeans and t-shirt with thinly veiled disapproval. You have 30 minutes. And if I don't go, then you'll embarrass your husband in front of the city's most influential people, and I suspect you're smart enough to know what happens after that. Claudia checked her watch. 29 minutes. Elena wanted to argue, but the look on Claudia's face told her it would be pointless. She closed the door and pulled the dress from the bag. It fit perfectly, of course. Someone had taken her measurements and passed them along. Another reminder that her life was no longer her own. She did her makeup quickly, pulled her dark hair into a low bun, and slipped on the heels that had been left beside the garment bag. When she opened the door again, Claudia nodded with something that might have been approval. Better. The car's waiting. Lucian was already in the back of the SUV when Elena climbed in, putting as much distance between them as the seat would allow. He was on his phone, typing something, and didn't acknowledge her presence. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than she used to make in 6 months. His dark hair swept back, his jaw tight. They hadn't spoken since last night. The silence in the car was suffocating. The museum was lit up like a jewel when they arrived, guests in evening wear streaming up the marble steps. Cameras flashed as they pulled up to the entrance. Elena's stomach clenched. Smile, Lucian said without looking at her, and stay close. Before she could respond, her door opened. Lucian was already out, buttoning his jacket, and a valet was extending a hand to help her. Elena took it, stepping out into a wall of sound. Music, conversation, the click of heels on stone. Lucian appeared at her side and took her arm, his grip firm and possessive. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. Elena wanted to pull away, but she felt the pressure of his fingers and understood the warning. Behave. They walked up the steps together, and Elena forced herself to keep her expression neutral, even as her heart raced. Inside, the museum's atrium had been transformed into a glittering ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, servers gliding through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Everyone looked rich, polished, powerful. Lucian guided her through the room with practiced ease, stopping to shake hands, exchange pleasantries, introduce her as his wife. Elena played her part, smiling when she was supposed to, nodding at the right moments. Most of the conversations washed over her, talk of stocks, real estate, political donations, the language of money. But she caught fragments that made her skin crawl. Mentions of shipments, territories, debts owed and collected. These weren't just wealthy socialites. These were Lucian's associates, people who operated in the same shadows he did. You're doing well, Lucian murmured in her ear during a brief lull. Keep it up. I'm not a trained dog. Could have fooled me. Elena's jaw clenched, but before she could respond, a woman in an emerald gown glided up to them, all white teeth and sharp eyes. Lucian, darling, is this the bride everyone's been whispering about? Vanessa. Lucian's tone was polite but cool. This is my wife, Elena. Elena, Vanessa runs the Castellani Foundation. Vanessa extended a perfectly manicured hand and Elena shook it. The woman's grip was cold, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Charming. I had no idea you were the marrying type, Lucian. You've always been so unattached. People change, Lucian said smoothly. So it seems. Vanessa's gaze raked over Elena, assessing. And where did you two meet? I don't recall seeing you at any of our usual gatherings. Elena felt Lucian's hand tighten on her waist, a silent signal. She smiled. We have mutual connections. It was all rather sudden. How romantic. Vanessa's voice dripped with skepticism. Well, welcome to the family, dear. I'm sure you'll find it educational. She drifted away, leaving a chill in her wake. Mutual connections? Lucian said under his breath. That's the best you could come up with? Would you prefer I told her the truth? That you blackmailed me into this? Keep your voice down. Then stop criticizing everything I say. Lucian steered her toward a quieter corner of the room, away from the crowds. When they were alone, he released her arm and turned to face her. You need to be more careful. People here are watching, listening. One wrong word and they'll start asking questions I don't want to answer. Maybe you should have thought of that before you forced me into this circus. This circus keeps the city running. These people, the ones you're looking down your nose at, control more than you can possibly imagine. Judges, politicians, police commissioners, cross the wrong person and you won't just embarrass me, you'll put yourself in danger. Elena laughed, the sound bitter. I'm already in danger. I married you. Something flickered across Lucian's face. Anger, frustration, maybe something else. But before he could respond, a man approached. Older, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. Lucian, the man said warmly, extending a hand. Good to see you. Lucian's demeanor shifted instantly, his expression smoothing into something professional. Councilman Harris, likewise. They shook hands, and Harris turned his attention to Elena. And this must be the new Mrs. Moretti. Congratulations. Thank you, Elena said, trying to match Lucian's composure. I have to say, Lucian, I'm impressed. I didn't think anyone could tie you down. Harris chuckled. But I suppose every man meets his match eventually. Something like that, Lucian said. Harris leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I wanted to discuss the waterfront proposal. There are some concerns from the planning committee. Nothing we can't handle, but it would be good to talk strategy. My office, Monday morning. Perfect. Harris clapped Lucian on the shoulder, nodded to Elena, and disappeared back into the crowd. Elena waited until he was out of earshot. Waterfront proposal? Business. What kind of business? Lucian's eyes narrowed. The kind that doesn't concern you. I'm your wife. Everything you do concerns me now. You're my wife on paper. Don't confuse that with partnership. The words stung more than Elena wanted to admit. She turned away, scanning the room, feeling trapped and out of place. Across the atrium, she spotted Vanessa watching them, her expression calculating. I need some air, Elena said abruptly. We're not leaving yet. I didn't say we were. I said I need air. She pulled away from him and headed toward a set of glass doors that led to an outdoor terrace. Lucian didn't follow. The terrace was blessedly empty, the night air cool against her flushed skin. Elena gripped the stone railing and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Below, the city sprawled out in all directions, lights twinkling like a blanket of stars. She heard footsteps behind her but didn't turn around. Hiding already? A male voice said. Not Lucian. Younger. Elena glanced over her shoulder to find a man in his early 30s leaning against the doorframe, a champagne flute in one hand. He had the kind of easy good looks that probably opened a lot of doors. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that suggested he didn't take much seriously. Just getting some air, Elena said carefully. Smart. These things can be suffocating. He walked over to the railing, leaving a respectful distance between them. I'm Marco, friend of the family. Well, friend is a strong word. Associate, maybe. Elena. I know. Everyone's talking about you. Lucian Moretti's mysterious bride. Marco took a sip of champagne. Gotta say, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more, I don't know, polished, hardened, the kind of woman who'd survive in his world. He looked at her, his expression curious. You seem too normal. Elena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. Maybe I am. Then what are you doing married to him? The question was too direct, too close to the truth. Elena turned away. That's not really your business. Fair enough. Marco set his glass on the railing. But if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who's not in Lucian's pocket, I'm around. Before Elena could respond, the terrace doors opened again. Lucian stepped out, his gaze locking onto Marco with the intensity of a predator spotting prey. Marco, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I thought you were in Milan. Got back yesterday. Couldn't miss the event of the season. Marco straightened, his easy demeanor slipping just slightly. I was just keeping your lovely wife company. How thoughtful. Lucian crossed to Elena and placed a hand on the small of her back, the gesture unmistakably possessive. We should get back inside. People are asking for you. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena let him guide her back into the museum, but not before she caught the look Marco gave her, half sympathy, half warning. The rest of the evening dragged. More introductions, more forced conversations, more smiling until her face hurt. By the time they finally left, Elena's feet ached and her head was pounding. The ride home was silent again. Lucian stared out the window, his jaw tight, his hands clenched in his lap. Elena could feel the anger radiating off him. When they reached the villa, he got out first and headed straight for his wing without a word. Elena stood in the foyer, watching him go, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. Claudia appeared from somewhere, her expression unreadable. You did well tonight. Did I? Better than expected. Claudia hesitated, then added, A word of advice, Mrs. Moretti. Be careful who you trust. Not everyone in Mr. Moretti's circle has his best interests at heart. Elena thought of Marco, his easy smile, his offer to talk. Noted. Claudia nodded and disappeared down the hall, leaving Elena alone in the cavernous entryway. She climbed the stairs to her room, peeled off the dress, and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing her slip. She was exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that went bone deep. This life, this performance, was going to break her if she wasn't careful. She couldn't let that happen. The next morning, Elena woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Breakfast. My office. 9 a.m. Don't be late. L. She checked the clock. 8:15. Elena showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and made her way downstairs. Lucien's office was in the West Wing, a place she'd been explicitly told was off-limits. But apparently the rules changed when he summoned her. She knocked once and pushed the door open. The office was exactly what she expected. Dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk positioned in front of a window overlooking the grounds. Lucien sat behind it, reading something on his laptop. A tray with coffee and pastries sat on the corner of the desk. Sit, he said without looking up. Elena sat in one of the chairs across from him and poured herself a cup of coffee. She didn't touch the food. Lucien closed the laptop and leaned back, studying her. We need to talk about last night. What about it? Marco. Elena frowned. What about him? Stay away from him. He was being polite. He was testing you, seeing how much he could get away with. Lucien's eyes were hard. Marco isn't your friend. He works for people who would love nothing more than to see me vulnerable. And you, he gestured at her, you're a vulnerability. Elena set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. I'm not an idiot. I wasn't going to share state secrets with a stranger. You shouldn't be sharing anything with anyone. The less people know about you, the safer you are. Safer from what? Lucien didn't answer immediately. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. There are people in this city who would use you to get to me, hurt you to hurt me. I can't afford that kind of leverage. Then maybe you shouldn't have married me. Too late for that. Elena stood, crossing her arms. You brought me into this world, Lucien. You don't get to complain about the consequences. He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Frustration. Maybe even regret. I know, he said quietly. The admission caught her off guard. She'd expected another fight, more walls, more ice. Not this. Lucien rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking tired. Look, I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to be smart. Keep your head down. Don't engage with people like Marco. Don't ask questions about my business. Just play the part and stay out of trouble. And if I don't, then we both suffer. Elena studied him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the one who'd grabbed her wrist 2 nights ago. There were cracks in his armor, small but visible. He wasn't as untouchable as he wanted everyone to believe. Fine, she said finally. I'll stay away from Marco, but I'm not going to be your silent, obedient wife. If you want me to play this role, I need to understand what I'm playing. Lucien's jaw tightened. You don't need to understand anything. Yes, I do. Because right now I'm walking through a minefield blindfolded, and sooner or later I'm going to step on something that blows up in both our faces. They stared at each other, locked in another silent standoff. Then Lucien sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. What do you want to know? Elena blinked, surprised. Everything? That's not specific. Start with the waterfront proposal. See? Lucien hesitated, then walked back to his desk and pulled out a folder. He slid it across to her. It's a development project. Hotels, condos, retail space. The city's been trying to revitalize that area for years. I'm one of the primary investors. Elena flipped through the documents. Plans, budgets, investor lists. It all looked legitimate. And the concerns the councilman mentioned? Politics. Some people on the planning committee want a bigger cut. Others don't want me involved at all. Because of who you are. Because of what they think I am. Elena looked up at him. And what are you, Lucien? He met her gaze, unflinching. A businessman who knows how to get things done. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Elena closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. You want me to trust you, to play along, but you won't even be honest with me. I'm being as honest as I can afford to be. That's not good enough. Lucian's expression hardened. Then we're at an impasse. Elena stood, her frustration boiling over. You know what? You're right. We are. Because I can't do this performance, this lie, without knowing what I'm protecting, and you can't seem to decide if I'm your wife or your prisoner. She turned and walked toward the door. Elena? She stopped but didn't turn around. It's not that simple, Lucian said, his voice quieter now. I wish it were, but it's not. Elena looked back at him, and for a moment she saw past the armor to the man underneath. Broken. Angry. Lost. Then maybe you should figure out what you want, she said, before this destroys us both. She left without waiting for a response. The days that followed were tense. Elena kept to herself, spending most of her time in the library or walking the grounds. Lucian was gone more than he was home, and when they did cross paths, the conversations were clipped, formal. But something had shifted after that morning in his office. The walls between them were still there, but they felt thinner somehow. More fragile. A week later, Elena was in the garden when she heard raised voices coming from the house. She followed the sound to Lucian's office, where the door was slightly ajar. You're making a mistake. That was Sal, the man she'd heard before. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because bringing her to the meeting tomorrow is reckless. Elena froze. Meeting? She needs to be seen, Lucian said. The longer she stays hidden, the more people will talk. Let them talk. Better that than putting her in a room with Dante. Dante won't touch her. You don't know that? A pause, then Lucian, colder. I'll handle Dante. Famous last words. Footsteps approached the door, and Elena barely had time to step back before Sal emerged. He stopped when he saw her, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Moretti. Sal. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and walked past. Elena pushed the door open the rest of the way. Lucian looked up from his desk, his expression guarded. How much did you hear? Enough. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Who's Dante? Lucian's jaw tightened. Someone you don't need to worry about. You're bringing me to a meeting with him. That makes it my business. I haven't decided if you're coming yet. Sal seems to think it's a bad idea. Sal worries too much. Lucian stood walking around the desk. Dante runs the docks. He's been pushing back on some of my shipments, trying to renegotiate terms. Tomorrow's meeting is to remind him who's in charge. And you want me there, why? Because perception matters. A man with a wife looks stable, settled. It sends a message. Elena crossed her arms. What kind of message? That I'm not going anywhere, that I have stakes in this city beyond business. So I'm a prop. You're my wife. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Lucian stepped closer, his expression serious. I won't let anything happen to you. You have my word. Elena wanted to believe him, but his word had gotten her into this mess in the first place. Fine, she said. I'll go. But if this goes sideways, don't expect me to play the damsel in distress. A ghost of a smile crossed Lucian's face. I wouldn't dream of it. The meeting was held in a warehouse near the waterfront, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside but hummed with activity within. Lucian brought 2 guards, both armed, both silent. Elena wore a simple black dress and heels, feeling out of place among the concrete and steel. Inside, a long table had been set up in the center of the warehouse. 3 men sat on one side, Dante presumably, in the middle, flanked by his own muscle. He was in his 50s, graying, with a scar running down the side of his face. Lucian took the seat across from him. Elena sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. Moretti, Dante said, his voice rough. Didn't know you were bringing a date. My wife, Lucian corrected. Elena, Dante's eyes swept over her, assessing. Heard you got hitched. Congratulations. Thank you. Dante leaned back in his chair. So, let's talk business. The conversation that followed was tense, coded, full of veiled threats and power plays. Dante wanted a bigger percentage of the shipments coming through his docks. Lucian refused. They went back and forth, neither giving ground. Elena listened, piecing together what wasn't being said. This wasn't just about money, it was about control, territory, respect. And Dante was testing Lucian. Halfway through, Dante's gaze slid to Elena again. She know what you do, Moretti? She knows enough. Does she? Dante smiled, the expression cold. Because I'd hate for your pretty wife to get hurt because she stumbled into something she shouldn't have. Lucian's hand clenched on the table. Careful, Dante. Just looking out for her. This world, it's not kind to outsiders. Elena felt the threat hanging in the air. She met Dante's gaze, refusing to look away. I appreciate your concern, she said evenly, but I can take care of myself. Dante laughed. Got some fire in her. I like that. Lucian stood abruptly. We're done here. You want better terms? Earn them. Otherwise, the deal stands as is. Dante didn't move. You're making a mistake, Moretti. Then I'll live with it. Lucian gestured for Elena to stand and they walked out together, the guards flanking them. Elena's heart didn't stop pounding until they were back in the SUV, the warehouse disappearing behind them. That went well, she said dryly. Lucian didn't respond. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched. Lucian. You shouldn't have engaged with him. He was threatening me. What was I supposed to do, sit there and take it? Yes. Lucian turned to her, his eyes blazing. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. Because now he knows you're not afraid, and that makes you a target. Elena stared at him, anger and fear warring inside her. You brought me into this. You don't get to be angry that I defended myself. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself. Lucian looked away, his voice dropping. I should have left you out of it. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Elena didn't know what to say. They rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Dante's words, the way he'd looked at her like she was a piece on a chessboard, a liability. She'd seen men like him before, the kind who measured everything in terms of power and weakness, and she'd made herself visible to him. She got out of bed and pulled on a robe, intending to go down to the kitchen for tea. But as she passed through the hallway, she noticed light spilling from under Lucian's office door. It was past 2 in the morning. Elena hesitated, then knocked softly. Come in. She pushed the door open. Lucian sat at his desk, still in his clothes from earlier, a glass of amber liquid in one hand. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his collar unbuttoned. Can't sleep either? He asked. Elena stepped inside, closing the door behind her. What are you doing up? Work. He gestured vaguely at the laptop in front of him. Always work. She crossed to the chair across from his desk and sat. You said you should have left me out of the meeting. What did you mean? Lucian took a drink, not answering right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. Bringing you was supposed to send a message, that I'm not just some lone wolf anymore, that I have something to protect. He looked at her. But all I did was paint a target on your back. Dante would have found out about me eventually. Maybe, but not like this. Not in his territory, on his terms. Lucian set the glass down. He's going to push back now. Test me. And the easiest way to do that is through you. Elena's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means you don't go anywhere alone. Not the city, not the grounds, nowhere. One of my men will be with you at all times. You're putting me under guard? I'm keeping you alive. This is insane. Elena stood, pacing. You dragged me into your world, forced me to marry you, and now I'm a prisoner in my own life because some dock boss wants to flex his muscles? Yes, Lucian's voice was flat. That's exactly what this is. Elena stopped, turning to face him. And you're okay with that? No, but I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Lucian laughed, the sound bitter. You really believe that? You think I woke up one day and decided to build an empire on threats and violence? This life, it chose me. My brother died, my father fell apart, and someone had to step up. Someone had to keep the family from collapsing. He stood, his hands braced on the desk. So I made choices, hard ones. And now I live with them. Elena saw the weight in his eyes, the exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. For all his power, Lucian Moretti was a man trapped by his own decisions. Your brother, she said quietly. What was his name? Lucian's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his face. Antonio. Tell me about him. Why? Because if I'm paying for his death, I should at least know who he was. Lucian stared at her for a long moment, then sank back into his chair. He picked up the glass again but didn't drink. Antonio was everything I wasn't. Smart, kind. He wanted to help people, be a doctor, save lives. His voice cracked slightly. He was 20 when he died, just finished his second year of medical school, top of his class. What happened that night? He was driving home from the library, late. It was raining. Lucian's knuckles whitened around the glass. Your mother ran a red light, hit him broadside. His car flipped 3 times. He died on impact. Elena felt the grief radiating off him, 15 years old but still raw. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, but punishing me won't either. Lucian looked at her and something in his expression crumbled. I know. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and heavy. Elena sat back down. My mother never talked about the accident, not once. But I remember, after it happened, she changed. She stopped smiling, stopped leaving the house unless she had to. She'd sit by the window for hours, just staring at nothing. Elena's throat tightened. I was 11. I didn't understand what was wrong. I just knew she wasn't the same person anymore. Guilt, Lucian said quietly. Maybe. Or grief. She killed someone. Even if it was an accident, she took a life. That's not something you just move past. Lucian was silent, his gaze distant. Elena leaned forward. You want to blame someone, fine. Blame her. Blame my father for helping her. But I was a child. I didn't know what happened until years later, and even then I only got pieces of the story. She met his eyes. I'm not her, Lucian. Punishing me for her mistakes doesn't make you righteous. It just makes you cruel. Lucian flinched like she'd struck him. You think I don't know that? His voice was rough, strained. You think I don't look at you and see someone who's innocent? Someone who doesn't deserve this? He stood abruptly, turning toward the window. But every time I try to let it go, I see Antonio's face. I hear my mother screaming when they told her he was dead. I remember standing at his grave and swearing I'd make someone pay. And now you have. You've made me pay. My father's paying. We're all paying. Elena stood, her voice breaking. But it's never going to be enough, is it? Because revenge doesn't fill the hole, it just makes it bigger. Lucian's shoulders sagged. He pressed a hand against the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I don't know how to stop. The confession was barely a whisper, but it hit Elena like a shout. She crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet behind him. Then maybe it's time to try something different. Like what? Like letting go. Lucian turned, his eyes red-rimmed, his face etched with pain. I don't know if I can. Then we're both trapped, Elena said. You in your grief, me in your revenge. And neither of us gets to be free. They stood there in the dim light of the office, 2 people caught in the wreckage of choices made long before they'd ever met. Elena could see the war raging behind Lucian's eyes, the need for vengeance battling against something else, something softer. I never wanted to hurt you, he said finally. I wanted to hurt them, your parents. But they're gone, and you're here, and He stopped, shaking his head. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Elena felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. She didn't forgive him, couldn't, but she understood him in a way she hadn't before. We can't change what happened, she said, but we can decide what happens next. What are you suggesting? A truce. We're stuck in this marriage for the next 5 years. We can spend it hating each other, or we can figure out how to coexist. She paused. Maybe even help each other. Lucian studied her, searching for something in her expression. Why would you help me? Because I don't have a choice either, and because... She hesitated. Because I think there's more to you than anger and revenge. I saw it tonight, in the car, in this office. You're not just the man who blackmailed me. You're also the man who lost his brother and never learned how to grieve. Lucian's jaw worked. For a moment, Elena thought he might shut down again, retreat behind his walls. But instead, he said, "Okay. Okay? A truce. We try to coexist." He looked at her, something vulnerable in his gaze. "But I need you to understand something. The world I operate in, it's dangerous. People like Dante, they don't play fair. If they think you're my weakness, they'll exploit it. So if I seem controlling or paranoid, it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I've seen what happens when you let your guard down." Elena nodded. "Then help me understand. Stop shutting me out. If I'm going to survive in your world, I need to know the rules. The rules are simple. Trust no one, watch everyone, and never, ever show weakness." Sounds exhausting. It is. Elena moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I don't think Antonio would want this. The revenge, the pain. I think he'd want you to be happy. Lucian's face twisted, and for a second Elena thought she'd pushed too far. But then he said, "You didn't know him." "No. But I know what it's like to lose someone you love. And I know that carrying their death like a weapon doesn't honor them. It just keeps you chained to the past." She left before he could respond, closing the door softly behind her. The next few days were different. Not easy, but different. Lucian kept his word about the security. Elena now had a shadow named Marcus, a quiet man in his 30s who followed her everywhere but kept his distance. She hated it at first, the constant presence, but Marcus was professional enough that she could almost forget he was there. Lucian was home more often. They started having breakfast together, tentative conversations about neutral topics. He asked about her work as a translator, seemed genuinely interested when she talked about the book she'd worked on. She asked about the waterfront project, and he explained the development plans without the usual deflection. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something. One afternoon, Elena was in the library when Claudia appeared with a message. "Mr. Moretti would like you to join him for dinner tonight. Not here. A restaurant downtown." "Is this business or—" "I believe it's personal." Claudia's expression softened slightly. "He's trying, Mrs. Moretti. That's more than most would expect from him." Elena wasn't sure what to make of that, but she agreed. The restaurant was small, intimate, the kind of place that didn't advertise and only seated 20 people at a time. Lucian was already there when Elena arrived, dressed in a dark suit, his expression less guarded than usual. "You came," he said as she sat down. "You invited me." "I wasn't sure you would." Elena picked up the menu. "I'm full of surprises." They ordered, and the conversation flowed more easily than Elena expected. Lucien talked about Antonio, tentatively at first, then with more warmth. Stories from their childhood. The time Antonio had talked Lucian into adopting a stray dog their mother had immediately banned from the house. The summer they'd spent at their grandmother's villa in Tuscany, getting into trouble and eating too much gelato. Elena found herself smiling, caught up in the image of a younger, lighter Lucian. A version of him that had existed before grief hardened him into something cold. "He sounds like he was a good person," she said. "He was. Better than me." Lucian looked down at his wine. "Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of who I became." "I think he'd understand why you made the choices you did, even if he didn't agree with them." Lucian met her eyes. "You're generous. More than I deserve. I'm practical. We're stuck together. Hating each other only makes it worse." "Is that all this is? Practicality?" Elena hesitated. The truth was more complicated. She didn't hate Lucian anymore. She couldn't. Not after seeing the man beneath the armor. But she didn't know what she felt instead. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "But it's better than it was." Lucian nodded slowly. "Better is a start." They finished dinner, and Lucian drove them back to the villa himself, dismissing the driver. The night was clear, stars visible above the hills. Elena watched the landscape pass, feeling something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. When they arrived home, Lucian walked her to her door, something he'd never done before. "Thank you," he said, "for tonight, for trying. Thank you for inviting me." They stood there in the hallway, an awkward silence stretching between them. Elena thought he might say something else, but instead, he just nodded and walked toward his wing. Elena watched him go, then went into her room and closed the door. She leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. This was dangerous. Getting close to Lucian, seeing him as human instead of enemy. It complicated everything, but she couldn't seem to help it. The following week, things began to unravel. It started with a phone call. Elena was in the garden when Marcus approached, his expression tense. "Mrs. Moretti, Mr. Moretti needs you in his office. Now." She followed him inside, dread pooling in her stomach. Lucian was on the phone when she entered, his voice low and furious. He hung up when he saw her. "Sit." Elena sat. "What's wrong?" Lucian pulled up something on his laptop and turned the screen toward her. It was a news article. The headline read, "Moretti Empire under investigation for money laundering." Elena's blood ran cold. What is this? Someone leaked financial records to the press, records that were supposed to be sealed. Lucian's jaw was tight. The investigation is federal. They're freezing assets, pulling permits, tearing apart every deal I've made in the last 5 years. Who would do this? I have my suspicions. Lucian closed the laptop. Dante's the most obvious, but there are others who'd benefit from seeing me taken down. What does this mean for us? It means everything I've built is at risk. The waterfront project, the shipments, all of it. He looked at her. It also means you're in more danger than before. If they're coming after me legally, they'll look at you too. Dig into your background, your father, everything. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. My father? Will they go after him? They might, if they think he has information they can use. Lucian's expression softened slightly. I'll do what I can to protect him, but I can't make promises. This is because of me, isn't it? Because you married me, because people see me as your weakness. This was always going to happen. You just accelerated the timeline. Elena stood, pacing. So what do? We fight back. I have lawyers, connections, people who owe me favors, but it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get public. He stood as well, moving toward her. I need to know if you're in this with me, if you're willing to weather the storm. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. You could walk away, divorce me, distance yourself from this mess. Elena stared at him. A month ago, she would have jumped at the chance. But now it felt different. Lucian wasn't just her captor anymore. He was someone who'd shown her pieces of himself no one else saw, someone who was trying, however imperfectly, to be better. I'm not walking away, she said. Why? Because we made a deal, a truce, and I don't break my word. Something flickered in Lucian's eyes. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. He stepped closer, close enough that Elena could feel the heat of him. Thank you, he said quietly. Before Elena could respond, the office door burst open. Sal stood there, his face grim. We've got a problem. Dante just made a move on the East Docks. 3 of our shipments have been intercepted. Lucian's expression went cold. When? An hour ago. He's holding them hostage, says he wants to renegotiate terms or the cargo disappears. Lucian swore under his breath. Get the car. I'm going down there. Lucian, that's exactly what he wants. He's baiting you. Then I'll take the bait. Lucian grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. I'm not letting him think he can push me around. Elena stepped forward. This is a trap. You said it yourself. Dante's testing you. If you go down there angry, you'll play right into his hands. Lucian looked at her, frustration written across his face. What do you suggest? That I sit here and do nothing? No. I suggest you think before you act. Use your head, not your anger. Sal glanced between them, then said, She's right, Lucian. Going in hot is a mistake. Lucian's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Elena thought he'd ignore them both and storm out. But then he took a breath, forcing himself to calm down. Fine. Set up a meeting, neutral ground, tomorrow morning. He looked at Sal. And double security on all remaining shipments. If Dante wants a war, I'll give him one. But on my terms. Sal nodded and left. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That was smart. That was you. Lucian ran a hand through his hair. I would have gone down there and made everything worse. You're learning. He almost smiled. Almost. The meeting with Dante was set for the next day at a warehouse Sal had secured. Empty. Public enough that neither side could pull anything without witnesses. Lucian brought 6 men. Dante brought 8. Elena wasn't allowed to come, but Marcus gave her updates throughout the day. The meeting was tense, shouting, threats. At one point, someone drew a weapon, but cooler heads prevailed. In the end, Lucian and Dante reached a temporary agreement. The shipments would be released in exchange for a higher percentage on future deals. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a total loss either. When Lucia Otsuyings came home that night, he looked drained. Elena was waiting in the sitting room, and he sank onto the couch beside her without a word. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad, but manageable." He leaned his head back, closing his eyes. "Dante's going to be a problem, but at least we bought ourselves some time." Elena studied his profile, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "You need to rest." "Can't. Too much to do." "Lucian." She reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on his arm. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." He opened his eyes, looking at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "Why do you care?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroy yourself." Lucian's expression softened. He covered her hand with his, the gesture tentative. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Probably not, but you're getting it anyway." They sat there in the quiet, the villa settling around them. Elena felt the warmth of his hand on hers, the unexpected comfort of his presence. Somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred. Enemy, captor, husband. He was all of those things, and none of them. "Elena," Lucian said quietly, "if this all falls apart, the business, the empire, I want you to know you're not trapped. I'll make sure you're protected, you and your father." "Don't talk like that. You're going to fight, and you're going to win." "You sound certain." "I am, because you're too stubborn to lose." Lucian laughed, the sound raw but genuine. "Maybe you're right." He squeezed her hand once, then stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." Elena watched him go, her hand still warm from his touch. She was in trouble. Real trouble. Because somewhere in the chaos and the fighting and the forced proximity, she'd started to care about Lucian Moretti. And that terrified her more than anything else. The realization kept Elena awake most of that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to pinpoint exactly when things had shifted. When Lucian had stopped being just her captor and started being something else. Someone else. It should have been simple. He'd blackmailed her, forced her into this marriage, used her as a pawn in his vendetta. Those facts hadn't changed. But somewhere between the silent dinners and the late-night conversations, between watching him grieve his brother and seeing him fight to protect what he'd built, Elena had started seeing past the armor to the man underneath. And that man was broken in ways that made her chest ache. She got up before dawn and went down to the kitchen, hoping coffee would clear her head. Bernard was already there, preparing breakfast. "You're up early, Mrs. Moretti." "Couldn't sleep." He poured her a cup without asking, the way he'd learned she liked it. Black, no sugar. Difficult times often make for restless nights. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Bernard, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long have you worked for Lucian?" 15 years, since just after his brother passed." "What was he like then, when you first started?" Bernard was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Angry, lost. He was 25 and suddenly responsible for an entire organization that his father had let slip through his fingers. Mr. Moretti Sr., he never recovered from Antonio's death. Started drinking, stopped showing up. Lucian had to step in or watch everything collapse. That's a lot of pressure for someone so young. Indeed, but he rose to it. Rebuilt what his father had destroyed, expanded into new territories, earned respect from men twice his age. Bernard met her eyes. But he paid a price for it. He closed himself off, stopped trusting anyone. The man you see now, that's what 15 years of carrying that weight looks like. Elena thought about Lucian's face last night, the exhaustion, the brief moment of vulnerability when he told her she wasn't trapped. Does he have anyone? Friends? Family? Sal is the closest thing to a friend. His mother passed 5 years ago. No other siblings. As for friends, Bernard shook his head. In this world, friendship is a luxury Mr. Moretti can't afford. That's a lonely way to live. Yes, ma'am, it is. Elena finished her coffee in silence, processing what Bernard had told her. It explained so much. The control, the walls, the inability to let go of Antonio's death. Lucian had been shaped by grief and responsibility into something hard and unyielding. and he'd been carrying it alone for 15 years. When Lucian came down for breakfast an hour later, he looked surprised to see her already there. "You're up early." "So are you." He sat across from her, and Bernard brought him coffee and a plate of food. They ate in comfortable silence, something that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Elena watched him over the rim of her cup, studying the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "The investigation," she said finally. "How bad is it really?" Lucian set down his fork. "Bad enough that I'm spending most of my day with lawyers. They're looking at tax records going back 10 years. If they find anything, and they will, because I'm not stupid enough to think I'm untouchable, they could freeze everything. Assets, accounts, properties. And if they do, then I lose leverage. Dante moves in on my territories. Other families sense weakness and start circling. It becomes a feeding frenzy." He looked at her. "That's why I can't show any cracks. The second I look vulnerable, it's over." Elena leaned forward. "What if you didn't do this alone?" "What do you mean?" "You've been carrying everything by yourself for 15 years. What if you let people help? Let me help." Lucian's expression was unreadable. "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'm smart. I'm good with details, and I'm not invested in this world the way everyone else around you is. Maybe that's an advantage. Or it gets you hurt. I'm already in danger just by being your wife. At least let me be useful." Lucian studied her for a long moment. Elena could see him weighing the risks, the variables, trying to decide if she was an asset or a liability. Finally, he said, "There's a gala this weekend, foundation fundraiser. Half the city's elite will be there, including people connected to the investigation. You want me to go with you? I want you to listen. Watch. These people, they talk when they think no one important is paying attention. Wives, assistants, staff, they gossip. And sometimes that gossip contains information worth knowing." Elena nodded. "I can do that." "Good." Lucian stood, grabbing his jacket. "I'll have Claudia take you shopping for a dress. Something impressive. We need to project strength." "Lucian." He paused at the door. "We're going to get through this," Elena said. "You're not alone anymore." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe gratitude, but it was gone before she could identify it. "I hope you're right." The gala was held at the city's Natural History Museum, the main hall transformed into something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, an orchestra playing Vivaldi. Women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos, everyone performing their carefully choreographed roles. Elena wore a midnight blue gown that Claudia had selected, sleek and elegant, with her hair swept up and diamond earrings that had belonged to Lucian's mother. She felt like she was wearing a costume, but when Lucian saw her, something in his expression made her forget to breathe. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd said anything like that to her. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you." They arrived together, Lucian's hand at the small of her back as cameras flashed. Inside, the crowd was thick with familiar faces from previous events. Elena recognized Vanessa across the room, deep in conversation with an older man in an expensive suit. Councilman Harris was there too, laughing with a group near the bar. Lucian introduced Elena to a parade of people whose names blurred together. She smiled, shook hands, made small talk about the weather and the museum's new exhibit. And all the while, she listened. Bits of conversation drifted past. A woman complaining about her husband's business partner. Two men discussing golf handicaps. Nothing useful until Elena excused herself to the restroom and found herself washing her hands next to Vanessa. "Elena," Vanessa said, her smile sharp. "You're looking well. Marriage must agree with you." "It has its moments." Vanessa reapplied her lipstick in the mirror. "I have to say, I'm surprised Lucian brought you tonight, given the circumstances." Elena kept her expression neutral. "What circumstances?" "Oh, you haven't heard. There's talk that the investigation into his finances is connected to some very interesting offshore accounts, the kind that fund less than legal enterprises." Vanessa capped her lipstick. "If the prosecutors can prove it, Lucian won't just lose his business. He'll lose his freedom." Elena's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to stay calm. "That's a serious accusation, isn't it?" "Of course, I'm sure it's all just rumor. Lucian's always been so careful." Vanessa's eyes glinted. "But even careful men make mistakes, especially when they're distracted." The implication was clear. Elena was the distraction, the weakness that had made Lucian sloppy. Well, Elena said, matching Vanessa's smile, I'm sure the truth will come out. It always does. She left before Vanessa could respond, her heart pounding. She found Lucian near the bar and pulled him aside, keeping her voice low. We need to talk. Now. He followed her to a quiet alcove near the coat check. What's wrong? Vanessa just told me the investigation is focused on offshore accounts. She said if they prove you're using them for illegal activity, you'll go to prison. Lucian's jaw tightened. She said that? Is it true? The accounts exist, but they're not what they think they are. He looked around, making sure no one was listening. I've been moving money out of certain businesses, cleaning up operations, trying to go legitimate. The accounts are part of that transition. Then why are they investigating? Because someone made them look dirty, planted evidence, doctored records. Whoever leaked the information wanted it to look like I'm laundering money. Lucian's hands clenched. And if they succeed, everything I've worked for is gone. Elena's mind raced. Who would have access to those accounts? Who could manipulate the records? Only a handful of people. My accountant, my lawyer, Sal. Lucian paused. And Vincent. The lawyer who'd brought Elena the contract, who'd handled all the arrangements for the marriage. You think Vincent is behind this? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Lucian pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. I need to go. Can you stay here, keep listening? See if anyone else mentions the accounts or the investigation. Be careful. He looked at her, and for a moment the mask slipped. She saw the fear underneath, the weight of everything threatening to crush him. I will. He disappeared into the crowd, and Elena took a breath, steadying herself. She moved through the gala, gravitating toward conversations, piecing together fragments. The investigation was the talk of the night, though most people were careful about what they said out loud. But Elena caught enough to paint a picture. Prosecutors were building a case. Federal charges. RICO statutes. They were going after Lucian with everything they had. Near midnight, Elena found herself on the museum's terrace, needing air. The city stretched out below, lights glittering like fallen stars. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Marco, the man from the fundraiser weeks ago. We keep running into each other, he said, joining her at the railing. Small world, or small circles. Marco looked out at the city. You heard about Lucian's troubles? Hard not to. People are saying he's finished, that this time he pushed too far, and it's finally catching up to him. Marco glanced at her. What do you think? Elena chose her words carefully. I think people underestimate him. Maybe. Or maybe you're the one underestimating what he's up against. Marco's voice softened. I meant what I said before. If you need help, if things get bad, I can get you out. Why would you do that? Because I've seen what happens to people who get caught in Lucian's orbit, and you seem like someone who deserves better. Elena studied him, trying to read his motives. Was this genuine concern or something else? I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine. Are you? Marco moved closer, his voice dropping. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's drowning and doesn't want to admit it. Before Elena could respond, a hand settled on her shoulder. She turned to find Lucian, his expression cold as ice. Marco, he said, his voice deadly quiet. We were just leaving. Marco held up his hands. Just making conversation. Find someone else to talk to. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Marco stepped back. Sure. Take care of yourself, Elena. He walked away, and Lucian's grip on her shoulder tightened. What did he say to you? He offered to help me if I needed to get out. That's all. That's all? Lucian's eyes blazed. He's trying to turn you against me. Or maybe he's just being kind. There's no such thing as kindness in this world, just angles and agendas. Lucian released her, running a hand through his hair. We're leaving, now. The ride home was tense. Lucian stared out the window, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Elena could feel the anger radiating off him, mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. Or desperation. When they reached the villa, Lucian went straight to his office, slamming the door behind him. Elena stood in the foyer, torn between giving him space and following. Finally, she made her decision. She knocked on the office door and walked in without waiting for permission. Lucian was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. I want to be alone. Too bad. Elena, no. You don't get to shut me out, not after everything. She crossed the room, standing beside him. What happened tonight? What did you find out? Lucian took a long drink. Vincent's been working with the prosecutors, feeding them information, manipulating records. He's the leak. Elena's breath caught. Why? Money, power, take your pick. Lucian's voice was bitter. I trusted him, gave him access to everything, and he sold me out. What are you going to do? What I have to. Lucian finally looked at her, and the emptiness in his eyes made her shiver. I'm going to destroy him. Lucian, if you go after him now, while the investigation is active, it'll only make things worse. I don't care. Yes, you do. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But acting on that anger will give the prosecutors exactly what they need to bury you. Elena stepped closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. You're smarter than this. Don't let Vincent win by making you reckless. Lucian's hands shook. He betrayed me. After everything I did for him, he turned on me like I was nothing. I know. And it's not fair and it hurts. But revenge right now is a luxury you can't afford. Then what do you suggest? We build a case. Quietly. Document everything Vincent did, how he manipulated the records, who he's working with. Then we hand it over to your lawyers and let them dismantle him legally. Lucian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. You're serious. Completely. You want justice? This is how you get it. Not by storming in and making a mess, but by being methodical. Strategic. Elena placed a hand on his arm. Let me help you. We'll do this together. For a long moment, Lucian didn't move. Then slowly, he set down his glass and covered her hand with his. Okay. Okay? We do it your way. His fingers tightened around hers. But if this doesn't work, it will work. Trust me. Lucian's eyes searched hers, and Elena saw the moment he made the decision, the moment he let himself believe her. I do. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena realized how close they were standing, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of his cologne. Her heart hammered in her chest. Lucian seemed to realize it at the same time. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. Elena. It was a question and a warning all at once. Elena knew she should step back, put distance between them. This was dangerous territory, the kind that would complicate everything, but she couldn't make herself move. I know, she whispered. Lucian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. This is a mistake. Probably. I don't want to hurt you. Then don't. He kissed her. It was tentative at first, almost careful, like he was afraid she'd pull away. But Elena leaned into it, her hands coming up to grip his jacket. The kiss deepened, and all the tension that had been building between them for weeks ignited. Lucian pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other at her waist. Elena felt herself melting against him, all the anger and fear and confusion of the past months dissolving into this moment, this connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. We shouldn't have done that. No, we shouldn't have. Are you sorry? Elena thought about it, about everything that had led to this moment, the contract, the blackmail, the forced marriage, the slow, painful thaw between them. No. Lucian pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching. I don't know what this is, what we're doing. Neither do I. But I don't want to stop. Elena's heart clenched. She knew this was complicated, messy, probably doomed, but she also knew that somewhere along the way, Lucian had stopped being just her enemy. He'd become something else, someone she cared about despite all the reasons she shouldn't. Then don't, she said. He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the feel of her. When they finally separated, he took her hand and led her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. They sat in the quiet, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. Thank you, Lucian said after a while. For tonight. For stopping me from doing something stupid. That's what partners do. Is that what we are? Partners? Elena looked up at him. I think we're trying to be. Lucian's expression softened and he pressed a kiss to her forehead. Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. Where are you sleeping? Here. I have calls to make, files to review. Lucian, I'm fine. Go. Elena wanted to argue, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight still pressing down on him. She stood reluctantly. Don't stay up all night. I'll try. She made it to the door before turning back. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Lucian's smile was small but real. I'm starting to believe that. Elena went upstairs, her mind spinning. Everything had changed tonight. The kiss, the admission, the fragile trust building between them. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she had some control over her own story. The next morning, Elena woke to find a note slipped under her door. Lucian's handwriting, neat and precise. Meet me in the office. We have work to do. L. She dressed quickly and found him already buried in documents, his laptop open, coffee going cold beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. You stayed up all night, Elena said. Couldn't sleep. Too much to process. He gestured to the papers spread across his desk. But I think I found something. Vincent didn't work alone. There are payments to an offshore account registered to a shell company. If we can trace that company back to whoever hired him, we might be able to flip this whole thing. Elena sat across from him, scanning the documents. Who has the resources to set something like this up? Anyone with money and a grudge. Dante's the obvious choice, but it could be Vanessa, Harris, even someone outside the city. Lucian rubbed his eyes. We need more information. Then let's get it. Elena picked up one of the files. What do you need me to do? Over the next 3 days, they worked together, building a case piece by piece. Elena combed through financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions. Lucian made calls, pulled favors, squeezed information out of contacts who owed him. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Vincent had been on someone's payroll for at least 2 years. The offshore account traced back to a company owned by a holding group that, after several more layers, connected to Dante's operation. It was him, Lucian said, staring at the final link in the chain. Dante set this whole thing up. The investigation, the leak, everything. Why? To take me down. Remove me from the board so he can move in on my territories without a fight. Lucian's hands clenched. He's been planning this for years. Elena saw the rage building in him and moved quickly. Then we use this against him. We give the evidence to the prosecutors. Show them Vincent was manipulated by an outside party. It might not clear you completely, but it shifts the focus and makes Dante the target. Exactly. Lucian looked at her, something like admiration in his eyes. You're good at this. I told you I could help. He stood, crossing to her side of the desk. I couldn't have done this without you. Elena stood as well, and they were close again, the air between them charged. We're not done yet. No, but we're getting there. Lucian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. When this is over, when things settle, don't, Elena said softly. Don't make promises about the future. Not yet. Why not? Because we're still in the middle of this. And I don't want to hope for something that might not happen. Lucian's expression tightened, but he nodded. Okay, but when we get through this, and we will, we're having that conversation. Deal. They worked late into the night, finalizing the documents, preparing everything for Lucian's lawyers. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. Elena's eyes burned from staring at screens and her shoulders ached. That's it, Lucian said, closing the last file. We're done. Elena slumped in her chair. Thank God. Lucian moved around the desk and held out his hand. Come on. Where are we going? You'll see. He led her out of the office, through the villa, and out onto the terrace overlooking the garden. The night was clear, stars visible above the hills. Lucian sat on one of the lounge chairs and pulled Elena down beside him. What are we doing? She asked. Taking a break? Enjoying the quiet? He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and Elena let herself lean against him. We've earned it. They sat in comfortable silence, the tension of the past days slowly ebbing away. Elena felt herself relaxing for the first time in what felt like forever, the warmth of Lucian's body against hers grounding her. Can I ask you something? Lucian said after a while. Sure. If things were different, if we'd met under normal circumstances, do you think we would have ended up here anyway? Elena thought about it. I don't know, maybe. We're both stubborn, both used to fighting for what we want. We probably would have butted heads. But I think we would have figured it out, eventually. She looked up at him. What about you? I think I would have seen you across a room and been terrified. Elena laughed. Terrified? Of me, of what you made me feel. I've spent 15 years keeping everyone at arm's length, not letting anyone get close enough to matter. His hand found hers again. But you got past all that, somehow. You let me in. That's the difference. Lucian was quiet for a moment. I'm glad I did. Elena's chest tightened with emotion. She'd come into this marriage hating him, seeing him as nothing more than the man who'd destroyed her life. But somewhere along the way, he'd become something else. Someone she trusted, someone she cared about, maybe even someone she was falling for. The thought terrified her, but she couldn't deny it anymore. Lucian, she said softly. He looked down at her, and she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Without thinking, she reached up and kissed him. This time, it wasn't tentative or questioning, it was certain, real. When they pulled apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight. Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone. Elena nodded. Okay. They went to his room, the first time Elena had been there, and lay down together on top of the covers, still fully dressed. Lucian pulled her against his chest, his arms around her, and for the first time in months, Elena felt safe. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard him whisper, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She wanted to tell him she never would, but sleep claimed her first. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the warm weight of Lucian's arm across her waist. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory flooded back, the late night working, the terrace, the decision to stay. She turned her head to find Lucian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How long have you been up?" she asked. "A while. I didn't want to wake you." His voice was rough with sleep. "You looked peaceful." Elena shifted to face him fully. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some. More than usual." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Having you here helped." The tenderness in the gesture made Elena's chest tight. This version of Lucian, unguarded, vulnerable, was so different from the man who'd sat across a desk and forced her to sign away her life. She wondered if anyone else had ever seen him like this. "We should get up," she said softly. "Your lawyers are coming at 10. "I know. 5 more minutes." They lay there in the quiet, neither wanting to break the moment. But eventually, reality intruded. Lucien's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he groaned. "Duty calls," he muttered, reaching for it. Elena watched him scan the message, saw his expression shift from relaxed to focused in seconds, the armor sliding back into place. "What is it?" "Sal, he's found something else." Lucian sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Apparently Vincent tried to flee the city last night. Airport security stopped him." "Where was he going?" "Doesn't matter. He's in custody now." Lucian looked at her. "The prosecutors want to talk to me this afternoon. They're offering a deal." Elena sat up too, pulling the blanket around herself. "What kind of deal?" "Immunity in exchange for testimony about Dante's operations. If I cooperate, the investigation into my finances gets dropped." "That's good, isn't it?" Lucian's jaw tightened. "It means testifying against Dante in open court, putting everything on record, making myself a target for every family that's allied with him." Elena understood the implications. Cooperation meant survival legally, but it could be a death sentence in Lucian's world. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." He stood, grabbing clothes from his closet. "But I need to decide before this afternoon." They dressed separately, Elena returning to her room to change, and met downstairs for a breakfast neither of them had much appetite for. Lucian's lawyers arrived precisely at 10, 3 men in expensive suits who spread documents across the dining table like battle plans. Elena sat in on the meeting, at Lucian's request. She listened as they outlined the deal, the risks, the potential outcomes. The lawyers were split. 2 thought Lucian should take it. One argued it was too dangerous. If you testify, the cautious one said, you're painting a target on your back. Dante has reach. Even from inside a cell, he can order hits. And if I don't? Lucian asked. If I refuse to cooperate? Then the investigation continues. They'll keep digging until they find something that sticks. And eventually, they will. It was a no-win situation. Elena watched Lucian's face, saw him calculating angles, weighing options. She knew what he was thinking, that after 15 years of surviving by never showing weakness, he was being forced to choose between two kinds of destruction. "Can I have the room?" Lucian said abruptly. The lawyers exchanged glances, then gathered their papers and left. Elena started to stand as well, but Lucian caught her hand. "Not you. Stay." She sat back down. Lucian walked to the windows, staring out at the grounds. "I've spent my entire adult life building this empire, making sure I was untouchable, and now I'm being asked to tear it down from the inside." "You're being asked to survive," Elena said quietly. "There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, survival means becoming everything I've always despised. A rat, an informant. Or it means being smart enough to know when to fold." Elena stood, crossing to him. "You told me once that in your world the rules are simple. Trust no one, watch everyone, never show weakness. But maybe those rules are what got you here in the first place." Lucian turned to look at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time for new rules. Ones that don't require you to sacrifice everything just to stay in the game." She took his hands. "You've carried this weight alone for 15 years. You've made yourself into this untouchable figure because you thought that was the only way to survive. But what if you're wrong? What if there's another way?" "Like what?" "Like walking away." Lucian's eyes widened. "You want me to walk away from everything? I want you to choose yourself for once. Choose a life where you're not constantly looking over your shoulder, where you can sleep without nightmares, where you can be happy." Elena's voice broke slightly. "You've been punishing yourself for Antonio's death for 15 years. Don't you think it's time to stop?" Lucian stared at her, something raw and painful in his expression. "I don't know how." "Then learn. We'll figure it out together." "And if I can't? If this is all I know how to be?" Elena reached up to cup his face. "Then we'll find out who you are underneath all this. The person you were before grief and responsibility turned you into stone." Lucian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I'm scared." The admission broke something open in Elena's chest. She pulled him into her arms, and he held onto her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. "I know," she whispered, "but you're not alone anymore. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." They stood there for a long time, holding each other. When Lucian finally pulled back, he looked exhausted but somehow lighter. "I'll take the deal," he said. "I'll testify. And then I'm out. I'm done with this life." Elena felt relief wash over her. "Are you sure?" "No, but I trust you. And if you think there's another way, then I'm willing to try." The meeting with the prosecutors happened that afternoon in a federal building downtown. Elena waited in the car with Marcus while Lucian went inside with his lawyers. 2 hours passed, then 3. Elena's anxiety mounted with each passing minute. When Lucian finally emerged, he looked drained but resolute. He slid into the car beside her and took her hand. "It's done. I signed the agreement. I testify next month." "And the investigation?" "Dropped. All charges dismissed in exchange for my cooperation." He squeezed her hand. "It's over." But Elena could see it wasn't over. Not really. The hard part was just beginning. The next few weeks were chaos. News of Lucian's cooperation broke, and the fallout was immediate. Associates distanced themselves. Business partners canceled deals. People who'd claimed loyalty for years suddenly couldn't be reached. Dante, from his jail cell awaiting trial, issued a statement through his lawyer, a warning disguised as a comment. Everyone in Lucian's world understood what it meant. Security at the villa tripled. Lucian stopped going into the city. Elena watched him withdraw into himself, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. She tried to reach him, but he'd put the walls back up. One night, she found him in his office, staring at a photo she'd never seen before. 2 boys, one teenager and one child, grinning at the camera. Lucian and Antonio. He was 7 there, Lucian said without looking up. We'd just gotten back from fishing with our grandfather. Antonio caught 3 fish. I didn't catch any. He smiled slightly. He gave me one of his so I wouldn't feel bad. Elena sat beside him. He sounds like he was kind. He was. Too kind for this world. Lucian set the photo down. I keep thinking about what you said, about how I've been punishing myself for his death. And you're right. I have been. Every choice I've made, every wall I've built, it's all been about trying to control a world that took him away from me. And now? Now I don't know. I've spent so long being this person, this version of myself that could survive anything, that I don't know who I am without it. He looked at her. What if there's nothing underneath? What if this is all I am? That's not true. How do you know? Because I've seen who you are when you let your guard down. I've seen you grieve and laugh and care about something other than power. That person is real, Lucian. Maybe more real than the mask you've been wearing. Lucian's eyes searched hers. You really believe that? I do. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you have me anyway. They stayed like that until Lucian's phone rang. It was Sal, his voice urgent. We've got a problem. Dante's people are moving. 3 cars spotted near the perimeter. Lucian's whole body tensed. Lock down the villa. No one in or out. He hung up and looked at Elena. You need to go to the safe room, now. I'm not leaving you. Elena, this isn't a discussion. If Dante's men get inside, then we face it together. She grabbed his hand. I'm not hiding while you put yourself in danger. Lucian looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps pounded in the hallway. Sal burst in, weapon drawn. They're at the gate. 6 men, heavily armed. Marcus is holding them off, but we're outnumbered. Call the police, Elena said. They won't get here in time, Sal replied. Lucian's mind was racing. Elena could see him calculating odds, strategies. Then his expression cleared. We don't fight. We negotiate. Are you insane? Sal said. These aren't negotiators. They're hitmen. Then we give them what they came for. Lucian looked at Elena. Me. No. Elena's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. If I go out there, talk to them, maybe I can buy us time until the police arrive. Or maybe they kill you the second you step outside. It's a risk I have to take. No, it's a risk we have to take. Elena turned to Sal. Is there a way to communicate with them without opening the gates? Sal hesitated, then nodded. Intercom system. They went to the security room where monitors showed the 6 men outside the gate. Elena's stomach churned at the sight of weapons, body armor. These men weren't here to talk. Lucian pressed the intercom button. This is Lucian Moretti. What do you want? A voice crackled back. You know what we want. You betrayed Dante. Now you pay. I'll come out, alone. You let everyone else inside go free. Lucian, no, Elena whispered. We don't negotiate with rats, the voice said. We exterminate them. The line went dead. Sal swore. They're going to breach. We need to move now. But before anyone could react, Elena grabbed the intercom. Wait. Elena, what are you doing? She ignored Lucian, pressing the button. This is Elena Moretti, Lucian's wife. If you want him, you'll have to go through me first. Silence. Then laughter. The wife wants to play hero? Fine. Come out here, both of you. Let's see how brave you really are. Lucian yanked the intercom from her hand. Are you out of your mind? You just made yourself a target. I already was a target. At least now we're negotiating. Elena looked at Sal. How long until the police arrive? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Then we stall for 10 minutes. She turned to Lucian. We go out there together. We keep them talking until backup arrives. This is suicide. This is survival, the kind that doesn't involve you sacrificing yourself. Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You said you'd try something different. This is different. We face this together. Lucian's resistance crumbled. He pulled her into a fierce kiss. If we die out there, I need you to know something. Don't. I love you. I should have said it before, but I was too much of a coward. His eyes were desperate. I love you, Elena. And I'm sorry I didn't give you the life you deserved. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You gave me yourself. That's enough. They went to the front entrance, Sal and 2 other guards flanking them. Lucian opened the door slowly, and they stepped out into the night. The 6 men stood beyond the gate, weapons raised. The leader stepped forward, a man with cold eyes and a scar across his throat. "Moretti," he called. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." "Let's talk," Lucian said, his voice steady. "There's no need for this to get bloody." "Oh, it's already bloody. You made sure of that when you turned on Dante." The man gestured with his gun. "Open the gate." "Can't do that." "Then we'll open it ourselves." Elena heard sirens in the distance. Still too far. They needed more time. "Wait," she called out. "You kill us. You start a war. Every family in the city will be watching how this plays out. You really want to be the ones who murdered a man and his wife in cold blood?" The leader's eyes narrowed. "You think we're afraid of consequences? I think you're smart enough to consider them." Elena stepped forward, ignoring Lucian's hiss of warning. "Dante's going to prison with or without Lucian's testimony. You kill us. All you do is prove the prosecutor's right about everything. You make martyrs of us. Is that what Dante wants?" The sirens were getting closer. The leader heard them too. He swore, gesturing to his men. "This isn't over, Moretti. Dante's got a long memory." "So do I." The men retreated to their cars and peeled away just as police cruisers came screaming up the drive. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, but the threat was already gone. Elena's legs gave out. Lucian caught her, holding her up as the adrenaline drained away. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen." "Learned from the best," she said, her voice shaking. They spent the next hour giving statements to police while crime scene techs documented everything. By the time the officers finally left, it was past midnight. Elena was exhausted, running on fumes, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Lucian pulled her into his office and poured them both a drink. "We can't stay here. Not anymore. Dante will send more people." "Where do we go?" "I have a property upstate, remote, secure. We can disappear there until after the trial." He looked at her. "It means leaving everything behind. Your apartment, your job, your life." Elena thought about the apartment she hadn't seen in months, the job she'd already mentally left behind. None of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was sitting across from her, looking at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to Earth. "Then we go," she said simply. They left before dawn, taking only what they could carry. The drive upstate took 3 hours, winding through forests and mountains until they reached a cabin on the edge of a lake. It was simple, rustic, nothing like the villa. But it was safe. For the next month, they lived in isolation. Lucian testified via video link, spending hours recounting years of Dante's operations. Elena sat beside him for every session, her hand in his, anchoring him. The trial was brutal. Dante's lawyers tore into Lucian's credibility, painted him as a criminal trying to save himself. But the evidence was overwhelming. Vincent, faced with his own charges, had corroborated everything. By the time closing arguments finished, the outcome was clear. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, Elena felt something unlock in Lucian's chest. He sagged against her, years of tension finally releasing. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over," she agreed. But it wasn't over. Not quite. There was still the question of what came next. They stayed at the cabin for another week, both of them avoiding the conversation they needed to have. Finally, one night as they sat by the fire, Elena broke the silence. "What do you want, Lucian? For your life, I mean." He stared into the flames. "I want to stop running, stop looking over my shoulder. I want to wake up and not think about territory or leverage or who might betray me." He looked at her. "I want to be normal." "Normal is overrated." "Maybe. But I'd like to try it." He took her hand. "What about you? What do you want?" Elena had been thinking about this for weeks. "I want to go back to work, real work, translating books, helping stories reach people. I want to visit my father without lying about where I've been. I want—" She hesitated. "I want to build something that isn't based on fear or obligation, something real." "With me?" "If you want that." Lucian pulled her close. "I want that more than anything. But Elena, you have to understand. I'm still the same person who blackmailed you, who forced you into this marriage. That doesn't go away just because I testified or because we're in love. I did terrible things to you. I know, and I'm not saying I've forgiven all of it. I don't know if I ever fully will. Elena pulled back to look at him. But I also know that people can change, that the worst moment of someone's life doesn't have to define them forever. You were drowning in grief and anger, and you made choices you shouldn't have. But you're trying to be better. That has to count for something. Does it? To me, it does. Lucian's eyes were wet. I don't deserve you. You keep saying that. Maybe start believing you do. They made love that night, slow and tender, both of them pouring everything they couldn't say into touch. Afterward, wrapped in each other, Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of fear. The next morning, Lucian made a decision. I'm selling everything. The villa, the businesses, all of it. Whatever's left after the legal fees and settlements, we split. Half goes to a fund for families affected by organized crime. The other half we use to start over. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her forehead. I want to do something good with what I have left. Something Antonio would have been proud of. They spent the next 6 months dismantling Lucian's empire. It was painstaking work, separating legitimate holdings from questionable ones, finding buyers, settling debts. Lucian's lawyers handled most of it, but he insisted on being involved in every decision. The fund he established grew quickly. Families who'd lost loved ones to violence, children orphaned by gang wars, communities destroyed by crime, they all received support. Lucian threw himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once applied to building his empire. Elena watched him transform. The hard edges softened, the constant vigilance eased. He smiled more, laughed easier. He became someone she could imagine growing old with. They moved into a small house in a quiet suburb, nothing like the villa. Lucian got a job consulting for a security firm. Legitimate work that used his skills without the danger. Elena went back to translating, taking on projects from her home office. They were normal, or as close to normal as two people with their history could be. One afternoon, Elena came home to find Lucian in the garage building something. She watched from the doorway as he measured and cut wood, his movements careful and precise. What are you making? She asked. Bookshelf. For your office. I noticed you were running out of space. Elena felt her throat tighten. This man who'd once controlled an empire was building her furniture. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. Thank you. For the bookshelf? For all of it. For trying. For changing. For loving me. Lucian turned in her arms, his expression soft. Thank you for not giving up on me. For seeing something worth saving. Always. They stood there in the cluttered garage, surrounded by wood shavings and power tools, and Elena realized this was what happiness looked like. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but two imperfect people choosing each other every day, building something new from the wreckage of what came before. 6 months later, Elena got a call from her father's nurse. His health was failing. She drove to the care facility where he'd been living, Lucian beside her, and spent the afternoon holding her father's hand. Marco Rossi looked small in the hospital bed, his face gray, his breathing labored. But when he saw Elena, he smiled. My girl, he rasped. You came. Of course I came. Elena blinked back tears. How are you feeling? Old. Tired. His gaze moved to Lucian, standing quietly in the corner. This your husband? Elena glanced at Lucian, who stepped forward. I am, sir. Lucian. Marco studied him with eyes that saw too much. You the one who kept her safe? Lucian's jaw worked. I tried to be. Good. That's good. Marco's breathing rattled. Elena, I need to tell you something. About your mother. About what happened. Dad, you don't have to. I do. Before I go, I need you to know. He paused, gathering strength. The accident. It destroyed her. She was never the same after. And I helped her cover it up because I loved her and I was weak. I thought protecting her was the right thing, but all I did was let her carry that guilt until it killed her. His eyes found Lucian's again. If your family was hurt by what we did, I'm sorry. More sorry than I can say. Lucian moved closer, his expression carefully neutral. I appreciate that, sir. You take care of my daughter. Don't let the past poison what you have. I won't. I promise. Marco squeezed Elena's hand. Be happy, sweetheart. Don't waste time on anger. Life's too short. He fell asleep soon after, and Elena sat with him until the nurse gently suggested they let him rest. In the car, she broke down, all the grief she'd been holding finally spilling over. Lucian pulled over and held her while she cried. When she finally quieted, he said, "He's right about not wasting time on anger. I know. I spent 15 years angry, and it cost me everything, my peace, my happiness, almost my life. I don't want that for us." Elena looked at him through tears. "What do you want?" "I want to forgive, really forgive. Not just your mother or your father, but myself." He cupped her face. "I want to build a life with you that isn't haunted by ghosts. Can we do that?" "Yes, we can do that." Marco Rossi passed away 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. They held a small service, just Elena, Lucian, and a few of her father's old friends. As they stood by the grave, Elena felt the weight of everything that had brought them to this moment. The accident that killed Antonio, her mother's guilt, Lucian's revenge, the forced marriage that had somehow become real. It was a tangled, painful history. But standing beside Lucian, his hand in hers, Elena understood that the past didn't have to dictate the future. They could choose differently. Be different. After the service, they drove to the waterfront where Lucian's development project had been. The buildings were finished now, sold to other investors. Lucian stood looking at them, his expression thoughtful. "I poured everything into this, thought it would prove something." He turned to Elena. "But you know what really matters? What actually makes a difference?" "What?" "The fund. The families we've helped. The kid who got a scholarship because his dad died in a gang shooting. The woman who got counseling after losing her son. That's real. That changes lives." Elena slipped her hand into his. "You're a good man, Lucian Moretti." "I'm trying to be. That's all I can do." They walked along this waterfront as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, terrified and furious, signing a contract that felt like a death sentence. She'd been so sure her life was over. But she'd been wrong. It wasn't ending. It was beginning. 2 years later, Elena stood in the kitchen of their house, flour on her hands, attempting to make bread from scratch. It was a disaster. The dough refused to rise, and she'd somehow gotten flour in her hair. Lucian came in from the garage. He'd been working on a project for the community center they'd helped fund, and took in the scene with barely contained laughter. "Need help?" "I need a miracle. This bread is hopeless." He crossed to her, kissed her flour-dusted nose, and took over kneading the dough. "You have to be patient with it. Can't force it." "Is that a metaphor?" "Maybe." They worked together, falling into an easy rhythm. This was their life now, small moments, quiet joy, building something together that wasn't based on obligation or revenge, but on choice. The doorbell rang, and Elena went to answer it. A young woman stood on the porch, nervous, clutching an envelope. "Can I help you?" Elena asked. "Are you Elena Moretti?" "I'm Maria, from the fund. Your husband's organization paid for my college tuition after my brother." She trailed off. "I just wanted to say thank you, in person. You changed my life." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "We're just glad we could help. It's more than help. It's hope. Knowing that someone cares, that there's a way forward after something horrible happens, that matters." Maria handed her the envelope. "I'm graduating next month. I wanted to invite you both to the ceremony." After Maria left, Elena stood on the porch, holding the invitation, overwhelmed by the weight of it. This was what they'd built. Not an empire, not power, but something better, something that mattered. Lucian appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You okay?" "Better than okay. I'm proud. Of us. Of what we're doing." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for pushing me to be better, for not letting me stay stuck in anger." "You did that yourself. I just stood beside you while you figured it out." They went inside, back to their disaster of a kitchen and their stubborn bread dough. Later, they'd go to Maria's graduation and see firsthand the impact of their work. They'd continue building their life together, one choice at a time. Elena thought about everything that had brought them here. The pain, the mistakes, the forced beginning that had somehow become something real. She wouldn't wish that journey on anyone, but she also couldn't regret where it had led. Because the truth was, People were complicated. Situations were messy, and sometimes the worst beginnings led to the most unexpected endings. Lucian had been her captor, her enemy, the architect of her suffering, but he'd also become her partner, her love, the person she chose every single day. Both things were true, and she'd learned to live with that contradiction. That night, as they lay in bed, Lucian said, "I never thought I'd have this. Peace, happiness. You. Neither did I. Do you ever regret it? How we started?" Elena thought about it honestly. "I regret the pain, the fear, but I don't regret where we ended up. We both had to break before we could become something better." "That's generous. That's realistic. We weren't good people when we met. You were drowning in revenge. I was numb with grief over my mother. We hurt each other, but we also saved each other." Lucian pulled her closer. "I love you. More than I thought I could love anyone. I love you too. Even when I hated you, I think part of me loved you." "That's twisted." "Welcome to our relationship." They fell asleep tangled together, and Elena dreamed of Antonio. In the dream, he was smiling, whole and young and free of pain. He looked at her and said, "Thank you for bringing him back, for reminding him how to be human." When Elena woke, she felt lighter, like some burden she hadn't known she was carrying had finally lifted. The years that followed weren't perfect. They fought sometimes, disagreed about things, had bad days and rough patches. But they weathered it all together, learning how to be partners instead of adversaries. The fund grew. They helped hundreds of families, funded community programs, built support networks for people trying to escape violent situations. It became Lucian's life's work, the thing he poured himself into with the same intensity he'd once devoted to building his empire. Elena returned to translating full-time, working on books that moved her, stories that deserved to be shared. She found joy in the work again, in using her skills to connect people across languages and cultures. They traveled, something Lucian had never done for pleasure. They saw the Italian village where his grandparents had been born. They walked the streets of Prague where Elena's mother had spent a summer before she married. They built new memories to replace the old painful ones. On the 15th anniversary of Antonio's death, they visited his grave together. Lucian brought flowers and knelt by the headstone, and Elena stood back, giving him space. "I'm sorry it took me so long," Lucian said quietly to his brother. "Sorry I wasted so much time on anger instead of living the life you never got to have. But I'm trying now. I'm trying to be the kind of person you would have been proud of." He stood and Elena took his hand. They walked away from the cemetery together, the past finally laid to rest. That night, over dinner, Lucian said, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "The contract, the one you signed. It specified 5 years." Elena's heart skipped. The 5 years were almost up. She'd forgotten or maybe pushed it from her mind. "And?" "I want to tear it up. Void it. Make sure you know you're free." Lucian's eyes were serious. "I don't want you bound to me by obligation anymore. I want you to choose to stay, every day. Not because you have to, but because you want to." Elena felt tears well up. This was the moment. The choice she'd been denied 5 years ago, finally being given back to her. "Okay," she said. Lucian pulled the original contract from his pocket. He'd kept it all these years and handed it to her along with a lighter. "Do the honors." Elena took them both out to the backyard. She held the contract over the fire pit, watching the flames lick at the edges of the paper that had once bound her entire future. The words blackened and curled, turning to ash. When it was gone, Lucian wrapped his arms around her from behind. "So, what do you choose?" Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. This man who'd been her prison and her salvation, who'd hurt her and healed her, who'd become the center of her world not through force, but through the slow, painful work of becoming someone worth loving. "I choose you," she said, "not because I have to, because I want to, every single day." Lucian kissed her, and it felt like a beginning. Not their first kiss, but the first one that was entirely free, chosen. Later that night, they renewed their vows in their backyard, just the two of them and the stars. No contracts, no obligations, just two imperfect people promising to keep choosing each other, keep building something beautiful from broken pieces. Elena thought about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, standing in Lucian's office, signing away her freedom to save her father. That girl had been terrified, convinced her life was ending. But she'd been wrong. Her life hadn't ended. It had transformed. She'd learned that people could change, that love could grow in impossible places, that the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures. She'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about refusing to let the past have power over the present. She'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about putting yourself back together afterward, pieces rearranged into something new. Most importantly, she'd learned that freedom wasn't just about the absence of chains. It was about choosing where to put your heart, who to give your trust to, how to spend the gift of each new day. And she chose this man, this life, this hard-won happiness. Elena Moretti stood in her backyard with her husband's hand in hers and felt grateful. Not for the pain they'd endured, but for what they'd built from it. A foundation strong enough to weather anything, a love that had been tested and proven real. The contract was gone, turned to ash and carried away on the wind. But what remained was so much better than what had been written on paper. What remained was choice and love, and two people who'd found each other in the darkness and refused to let go until they'd stumbled together into the light. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.